Ever cracked open a book and kind of wished, you could grab the steering wheel of the story?
Right.
That's the beauty of game books. It's like
Yeah.
choose your own adventure, but usually with more strategy involved and probably some dice rolling for good measure.
Oh, definitely. Dice are key.
And today we're diving into a classic, Dave Morris's Crypt of the Vampire. But get this, we're not just talking about one creepy mansion. We're time traveling a bit. Comparing the 1984 original with its 2024 counterpart, can you escape the vampire's lair?
It's fascinating, really, seeing how Dave Morris revisits his own creation after 4 decades. You can trace the evolution of the genre, how our relationship with horror has changed, even.
Okay, so for those who haven't experienced the joy of a good game book, imagine this. You're not just reading, you're the one calling the shots. Every page presents a choice. A potential trapdoor, a hidden passage, maybe even a tasty cobweb. You got to decide whether or not to eat.
Hopefully not too many cobwebs, but you get the idea.
And in Dave Morris's world, one wrong turn. And, well, let's just say, Count Tenebris isn't exactly known for his 5-star Yelp reviews.
He's not big on second chances, which is part of what makes these books so compelling. You're constantly on edge, never quite sure if you're making the right call. Both versions strand you in Tenebron Hall.
Right, which, spoiler alert, is not your average bed and breakfast.
Definitely not. It's this sprawling Gothic mansion just dripping with atmosphere. But how Dave Morris plays with those expectations, the reader's assumptions about haunted houses and vampires, that's where you see the real differences between the two.
So, break it down for us. Besides a few decades and a whole lot of technological leaps, what sets these two apart?
Well, the 1984 Crypt, that's your classic, no-nonsense game book experience. You're thrown right into the action, no hand-holding. You decide who your hero is, what skills they possess, what motivates them to step foot in a vampire's lair in the first place.
It's unforgiving, right? One wrong move and it's curtains.
Yeah.
Game over.
Precisely. Permadeath at its finest, it captures that old-school tension where every choice carries this weight. Now, fast forward to 2024. Can you escape? It still has that gothic horror vibe, but there's a self-awareness there, a playful wink to the reader. Like, we all know how this goes.
We've all binged enough horror movies to have developed a slightly morbid sense of humor about it all.
Exactly. And to reflect that, Morris introduces this concept of spending lives to continue the adventure.
Wait, so you're telling me I get multiple tries at not getting turned into a vampire?
Well, sort of.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's a clever way to acknowledge the inherent absurdity of some of these scenarios, right? Like, yes, realistically, facing down a werewolf with a rusty spoon probably wouldn't end well. But it's a game, and allowing players to spend lives to see what happens, it lets them explore more of the story.
I love that. It's like the game is saying, we get it. You tried to fight a vampire with a spork. It happens to the best of us. So how does this whole spending lives thing actually work? So let me get this straight. Not only do I get to choose my own adventure, but I might get a couple of do-overs if I, say, accidentally wander into a den of hungry vampires.
You got it. It's a more forgiving approach.
Sign me up. But before I book my flight to Transylvania, let's talk about the lair itself. Tenebron Hall, right? What am I dealing with here?
Picture this. A sprawling Gothic mansion. Gargoyles glowering down from the rooftops, moonlight filtering through dusty windows. You can almost hear those floorboards groaning with every step, each creak echoing like centuries of dark secrets.
Okay, I'm spooked already. And I'm guessing Count Tenebris isn't the only resident I need to worry about.
Oh, absolutely not. There's a dungeon, of course. Because what's a good vampire lair without a dungeon full of, traps, monstrous guardians, that sort of thing?
Naturally. Sounds like my kind of place. And knowing my luck, I'd trip over every single trap.
Yeah.
But half the fun of these game books is the encounters. What are some of the standout moments that really stick with you?
Oh, there are so many good ones. The original Crypt, it has this classic encounter with a wight guarding a silver candlestick. And it's such a smart way to introduce item collection as a mechanic, right? Because you might be tempted to just charge in, sword swinging, but only silver can harm a wight.
So it's like the game is teaching you to think strategically from the get-go, to pay attention to those little details. And I bet that silver candlestick comes in handy later on, knowing these stories.
Oh, absolutely. It's all connected. Then there's the encounter with the mysterious potion. And you have to make a choice. Do you risk drinking it, knowing it could alter your fate? Maybe even, rewind time? Or do you play it safe, figuring the unknown is always more dangerous?
See, that's what I love about game books. They cap into that part of us that wants to explore, to take risks, but in a safe, fictional way.
Exactly. And speaking of risks, we can't forget the 2024 version's room full of disembodied heads.
Okay, that's both disturbing and kind of hilarious.
Right. It's the perfect example of how Morris injects that little bit of humor into the horror.
Yeah, it's like a horror comedy in game book form. I can get behind that. But how do you actually navigate this haunted house? It can't all be about fighting monsters and dodging traps, can it?
Nope. Both versions use this system of keywords. So as you progress through the story, making choices, you collect these keywords, and they unlock specific paths or encounters. It's like those little breadcrumbs you leave in the woods, except these breadcrumbs can lead you to treasure or to your doom.
So it's kind of like those dialogue trees in video games, where like one snarky comment to a troll can send you down a whole other storyline.
Exactly. And then, of course, there are the items. Some are practical, like, a lantern to help you see in the dark. And then there are others that are just weird.
Weird how... Give me an example. Don't leave me hanging.
Okay. How about a golden flute?
A golden flute.
Yeah, sure.
And what do you do with a golden flute in a vampire's lair?
Well, you'll have to play the game and find out. But trust me, each item, no matter how strange, has the potential to be your salvation or your downfall. It all depends on how you use it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Spooky mansions, creepy dungeons, even a golden flute. But what's the takeaway? Why does any of this matter?
That's the thing about these game books. They're like these little time capsules.
Right.
We can look back and see how things have changed.
Like how scary we like our stories.
Yeah, exactly. The 1984 Crypt, it's a product of its time, a world where you had to fight for every victory.
On those save points.
Exactly. But then you look at Can You Escape, and it's like, we've loosened up a bit, learned to laugh at ourselves,
Because let's be honest, who hasn't tried to, like, reason with a zombie or something?
Right. We've all been there.
And that spending lives thing, it's kind of brilliant when you think about it. It's like, yeah, failure is part of the journey. Learn from it and move on.
And honestly, I think it makes the stories even more engaging. Because, let's face it, sometimes the most fun choices are the ones that seem a little bit doomed from the start.
Absolutely. Where's the fun in always playing it safe?
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the vampire's lair.
Always a pleasure.
But before we go, we want to leave you with one final, slightly spooky thought. If you found yourself trapped in Tenebron Hall, face-to-face with Count Tenebrous, what one item would you want in your inventory? Think carefully.
Yeah.
Your life might depend on it. Until next time, happy adventuring.